So these 68 verses in the Mahabharata which describe Bharatvarsh exactly have been ignored by scholars very happily. And I don't know how they square it with their own conscience, but the thing has been ignore evidence if you don't like it, mistranslate it, misconstrue it, dismiss it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Walk Indian History podcast.
Namaskar. Very happy to be back again with yet another scintillating topic.
Yes, so this of course is a very remarkable week for India, for the Indic civilization, for Bharat. So, this is why we have decided to kind of have a topic along those lines. I mean, last week we got right into the meat of the matter on Ram Janmabhoomi itself. But this week, I think we've got something even more interesting to talk about.
Yes, indeed. And you said it, Utkarsh. It's an important week for Bharat. So you said it, the topic. India or Bharat?
Yeah, I think there's so many different things here, right? So, what I've got for you is some of the questions on my mind, right? There are, I think, around 2 or 3 of them. Of course, if we look at it from a very, very contemporary point of view, what's been on in the news with the G20 and everything is, of course, India and Bharat. It's not, I won't call it renaming. It's not really renaming because both of them exist in the constitution. Even I know that. But really bringing that particular
what do you mean, even
fore.
you are not the most ill-informed person in this world, are you?
I don't have a very high opinion on terms of how well informed I am about some things. So I just erring on the side of caution. I would rather pretend to know less than I do than
well, I think
more.
you're pretending to know
sure.
very, very little, but okay, all right. Just as long as that's a persona you want to assume.
So that's one. So there are 2 or 3 questions. There are 2 or 3 things that I want to get your knowledge and know more about myself from this episode. First thing itself, linking right back to India and Bharat, I think some sort of perspective on both names, the origin, the history, the time period of both names, some perspective on the topic would be very, very helpful even for me. Yes, I do know both are in the constitution, but I would like to know a little bit more about it so I could have an informed opinion. The second one, which I'm also even more interested in, is trying to understand a little bit about the identity of this country, right? I mean, this country, what it is today, is different from what it was 70, 80 years ago, pre-independence. And it has had many shapes and forms over the years, right?
Utkarsh, if I could just clarify, how do you mean different in terms of the making of 2 other countries from that undivided India? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, so there's that. And then what I want to understand is, there are countries in the world today that weren't a country till 60 years ago. Like, I'll take my country, for example, where I'm staying, Singapore. It was formed in 1965. It was a part of Malaysia. There are other countries that have been around for much, much longer. So I want to understand a little bit about India or Bharat's identity as a country, how far back in time it goes, how it has evolved over the years. That for me is another topic of interest. And then the third thing I wanted to know about is within India or Bharat itself, if I think about the history that I know, during the time of the British at least, and perhaps before that, you had what was British India, and then you had a lot of princely states, right? All the small, Hyderabad, Junagadh, Kashmir itself, I guess. I'm not sure if it was a princely state or something else, but point is you had all of these tiny segments, parts of India that weren't entirely identifying, either they were paying tribute to the British or... So I want to understand a little bit, have these states been part of India historically? How does this all come in? Is this all part of the Indian civilization? Was it something different? Was it forcefully integrated? So I want to get some perspective on that as well. So there's a lot that I want to know actually, but I would leave it to you to start wherever you think is more appropriate so that we can make some sense out of the story.
So all very, very intriguing and Questions, the answers to which will really lead us back down many, perhaps thousands of years, and also to the roots of our civilization and country. I was hoping you would tell me where you want me to start, because for me, I go back to first principles. So I will be back to the Rigveda and start from there.
Let me ask you a very pointed question. When does the concept and identity of India or Bharat, let's say Bharat because we know Bharat is older, probably, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
It is.
When does that begin?
The identity of Bharat, again, for most things in this subcontinent, you have to go back to the Rigveda. And I will. But I want to say something before that. When we talk about a country, there are political countries, there are civilizational countries, there are civilizational nations. So for India, we have to consider both aspects as a civilizational identity and as a political identity. And we will talk about both of these things in different ways and see how they come together or how they diverge. So we'll have to always keep these two different things in mind. There is something which is a civilizational ethos. It is a group of people spread over a region who all identify as being from the same civilization. Now there is also something called political boundaries. Civilizational and political boundaries sometimes are the same, sometimes they are not. In India's case, they are not always the same. As a civilization, it has, since it is the oldest standing continuous Bronze Age civilization, it has seen a lot of changes in its political boundaries. The same can be said, of course, of most of the countries that we know. Take England, for example, or France. Just go to one of these YouTube channels which show you year by year what were the political boundaries of these countries. And they have changed massively over the years. They can possibly go back 2000 years, maybe around the time the Romans came to Britain. But for India, of course, it's much, much older. So I will look at it we will look at the Vedic and the Saraswati Sindhu civilizational age. We will look at the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. We will look at the Puranic age. We will look at the first millennium of the Common Era, where there were a number of visitors to India who have left their own descriptions and accounts. And then we will come to the British period, and we will come to the colonized Indian identity, and then we will come to 1947. Perhaps, it would not be a bad idea to start from the age of the British. I say that because the whole doubt about whether India was a country or not, whether India was its name, whether it was Bharat, Bharatiya people did not have any doubts about it. It was the colonizers who created these seeds and doubts for obvious reasons. They did not want this country to identify as a unit. Makes it much easier for them, doesn't it? So it was Strachey in 1872 who was an acting viceroy, John Strachey. So he said, no, there's no question of India being a civilization. The famous thing about Winston Churchill saying that India is no more a country than the equator is a country. So it was the colonizers who laid these seeds of doubt. It was not Bharatiya people themselves. However, over the years, because of our education in the last 200-300 Eurocentric years, we have come to understand the colonizers' point of view as our own. That is why we have so many of these doubts in our minds. Now, it would also be good to look at India, that is Bharat. Why did the makers of the constitution put both these in the constitution? Simply because both India and Bharat have a very long history behind them. Bharat is the way that the people who live in this subcontinent have always thought of themselves. And India is the way others have seen them, others have called them. Bharat comes from the Rigveda, and I'll go into details about the tribe called Bharat, from where this country gets its name and why it does so. Do you remember, Utkarsh, that I have been telling you that I'm going to do a very fascinating thing, a trip into the Rigveda with some of Sanjeev Sanyal's analysis and some of Shrikant Talageri's analysis and my own reading. So today is the day for that. We'll do that very...
Okay, I've been waiting for it for months and you refused to tell me. You kept it for the podcast. Okay, I look forward to it now.
Yeah, so we'll do that today. It's complex, intriguing, and you have to, go down a very well-defined but complicated path. So I'll do that. So that is Bharat. Okay. Now, even India, the word India, Hindu, that also has a really old, hoary past. For many countries, it would be unthinkable that if you say that something was first found in the 6th century before the Common Era, it's new. But yes, India was the new name or newer than Bharat. It was found, the earliest place where it is found is in the inscription of the Persian king Darius I. This is in the 6th century before the Common Era. So, that's where India comes from. The dating of the Rigveda, where we first find Bharat, we have already discussed how difficult it is, but of few thousand years. We don't know how many thousand years. So, Bharat is older, but India is pretty old too. And India could come from the Indus River. It could come from Sindhu, which becomes Hindu, which becomes Indu. It could also come from the word Indu, which means a drop of som. Remember that som ras which we did in one of the earlier podcasts, which was the divine mystic drink of the Aryan people of the Rigveda. So Indu, that is one drop of that som. It is also possible that the word India came from that. But mostly, it is related to the Sindhu river and the turning of Sir into her and then becoming Indu. So that's one way of looking at it.
Where does Sindhu come from then?
The name of the river Sindhu, well, proper names is very interesting. If you ask me, where does the name Saraswati come from? What will I say?
That's
or
true.
Where does the name Ganga come from? What will I say? These are descriptions that our ancestors gave to the natural things that they saw around them. So probably an impossible question with no real answer.
It's a question without an answer, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately some sound is accorded to some property.
Yes.
And it is what it is, whatever is accorded to that property.
Sometimes, we can go back to a certain, we can peel a few layers, but then in the end we are left with something which we cannot peel. So as far as India is concerned, we peel a few layers and reach maybe Sindhu or we reach Indu, but beyond that the layers are difficult to peel. So that's so far as India is concerned.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Were you asking something?
No, just go ahead. I was just recounting what you were saying, but go ahead.
So that's as far as India is concerned. The other, of course, is Bharat, and here I also want to tell you that there is yet another name that was used for this subcontinent, and that is Jambudweep, which is like the island of the jamun. You know the jamun fruit? So it's either because of the shape of the peninsula, which very roughly you can say it's like a jamun, because it is elongated at the end, or because jamun was really endemic to this country, to this subcontinent. So Jambudweep is another very, very, very old name given to this part of the world. And I don't know if you ever notice when you sit down for a puja, Utkarsh, when you are locating yourself in space and time, which I discussed last time in the Jyotish video, time before last. So then you have this thing which says Bharat Khande Jambudweepe. So both Jambudweep and Bharat are there when in each puja, in any puja, any Hindu locates themselves on this earth. We will not discuss Jambudweep so much because it's fallen out of use. It was used very much by the Mauryans. They thought of themselves as living in Jambudweep. Their kingdom is Jambudweep. You find this in Mauryan inscriptions. But it's not so popular. It is Bharat and India which have retained their popularity. Now for Bharat, if we want to know where does this word come from, or where did we see it, hear it first? So for that we have to go back into the Rigveda. Now the Rigveda has 10 mandals. You can think of these as 10 books roughly. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But the order of their chronology is not in order of the numbers. So 1 is not the oldest and 10 is not the newest.
Yeah, I remember we talked about this in one of the previous episodes as well.
Yes. So there are some books out of these 10 which are called the family books. They are called the family books because they have been composed exclusively or almost exclusively by one family. Say if you have book 6 is the oldest book of the oldest mandal of the Rigveda, and it has been composed by the Rishi family of the Bharadwajas. So in this way there are those family books which are book 2, book 3, book 4, book 6 and book 7. These are composed by families of different rishis. I think we'll put these on the screen so that it's easier for people to follow this. So after this come the other books which are 1, 8, 9 and 10. Now is left 5. So 5 is kind of a middle book. It has some characteristics of the family books and it has some characteristics of the newer books which are multi-family. Many different rishis have got together to write this. So if I state this in order, and you must note this, the family books from the oldest to the newest are 6, 3, 7, 4, 2, and then you have the middle part family, part non-family book which is 5, and then you have the others which are 8, 9 and 10. There is also a set of Khilani. Do you remember the Khilani, Utkarsh? The first episode we did on Devi and women, I had talked of the Shri Suktam. So the Shri Suktam is from the Khilani. So the Khilani are those shloks, those which we cannot place in any of the books. So obviously, a lot of the recensions of the Rigveda have been lost. There's a lot of matter which we cannot place properly. So these are all put together and called Khilani. In English, you can understand it as miscellaneous. And they are obviously newer than all of these. Now the interesting thing is that book 1 has excerpts from events and whatever compositions are there of all the periods except 6, 3 and 7. So it has events and compositions from 4, 2, 5, 8, 9, 10. But it is called book 1, and then I'll tell you why this becomes important. Now this is to give you a kind of background of the times in which each of these mandals is supposed to have been composed. Now let's come to book 6, the oldest book. It is here that for the first time you come across the word Bharat. Bharat over here is a tribe. It's also called the Trutsu tribe. This Bharat is a tribe which is doing well for itself, and a lot of its exploits are being mentioned here, and a lot of its kings are being mentioned here. So Bharat, the first king of this tribe, then his son is Devvrat, then you have Srinjay, then you have Divodas, then you have Pratardan. All these are names of very important kings of the Bharat tribe. In book 3
so when you say tribe, so this specifically means that in book 6 Bharat is a tribe, it is not the entirety of that civilization living in that area yet.
No, not yet.
Okay, so that's important. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the seed. This is where it begins. It is this tribe which has given all of us our identity and name. It's from here that everything started. And it is they who established themselves in such a way across the subcontinent that we are now the Santati of Bharat. We are all the children of Bharat. So that is the seed, the source of the identity of this subcontinent. So I gave you the names.
So what you're saying then is that the Bharat tribe, because people have been going upwards, downwards, forwards, backwards, down the world ever since everybody came out of Africa. But what you're saying is
although
that the Bharat tribe,
Utkarsh, I
Yeah.
am going to stop you over there, because the theory that everyone came out of Africa is being increasingly challenged, and especially
Okay.
through certain remains which have been found in India and also in some other places. So let's flag that.
Okay, we'll keep that. We'll keep that aside.
Flag that.
The point that I'm trying to make is there have been people located geographically over the Indian subcontinent. Even, I think, at the same time and possibly preceding the Bharat tribe. Maybe. Or what I'm trying to say is they spread their culture over the subcontinent. I'm trying to understand, is that what we are saying?
Yes,
Trying to understand the
yes.
impact.
So
Yes.
it's not as if they were the first people in the subcontinent. Of course, there were
Yes.
others. There were others
Yeah.
contemporaneous with the Bharat tribe. There were others older than the Bharat tribe, and they have also been mentioned in Book 6.
Okay.
So it is a
Got it.
question.
So these are the folks who spread their culture and created
Yeah.
a common identity
Yes.
over a large
Yes.
geographical area, essentially.
Yes, yes. And I will also tell you how they did this. That's the
Okay,
next part
yeah.
of the story. So I've told you Bharat and his descendants. So they are the names of many kings. I gave you the names of some kings. The most important person next to Bharat of this tribe was Sudas. He was the son of Pijavan, who was one of the descendants of Bharat. This is from Book 3 and Book 7, Mandal 3 and 7 of the Rigveda. What did Sudas do? Sudas actually did something very something which broke the mold. His family priest was Vishwamitra. He decided to replace Vishwamitra with Vashishtha. Now that created a huge kind of anger and obviously resentment in Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra collected a whole group of other kings. So you were asking about others. What Vishwamitra did was he collected a group of 10 kings and they challenged devotas. So this is called the Dashraj Yuddha, the battle of the 10 kings.
Any timing on this Dashrath?
Dashragya Yuddha, timing again, it
Dashragya.
depends on when you date the time, the Rigveda.
Okay, so it's the same question.
It's the same question. So is it 8,000 years ago? Is it 10,000 years ago? You do know that in Bhirana, a month ago, about 10,000 plus years old civilization has just been carbon dated. So this is the oldest point of the Harappan civilization which we have found as yet in Bhirana. Before that it was Mehergarh. Now last month it is Bhirana. So it has been dated to about 7,600 years before the Common Era. So you just add 2,300 to it and you'll reach about 10,000.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, this is like literally, this is the definition of breaking news, is it not?
Yes, it
This
is.
discovery is literally after we started this podcast. I'm
Yes,
guessing.
yes, yes. And that's why I'm telling you, Utkarsh, a lot of the things that we talk about, these things are going to change, and some of the things which we say, there are gaps in the evidence, those gaps are going to be filled very quickly. And in the end, I will also tell you how the books of the Rigveda parallel the discoveries that we have found in the area of the Sindhu Saraswati civilization. But for the moment, let us stick to the Bharat tribe. Let us stick
let's go back to that.
one of the descendants of Bharat, who was Sudas. Sudas was an expansionist. He was somebody who had new ideas. He really wanted to extend things. That's why probably he did not get along with Vishwamitra, who had a more conventional kind of, more conventional ideas. There are many hints of this, both in the Rigveda and in many other Puranic stories. So therefore, then Vishwamitra got together a confederacy of 10 kings, that is Dashragya, and on the banks of the river Ravi, there was this huge fight between Sudas and these 10 kings. Who was there in this confederacy of 10 kings? So they were tribes. These are the names of tribes, and I will read them out. The Anu, Druhyu, Bhadana, Alina, Prithu, Sivas, Bhrigu, Parshu, Shinyu, Matsya, Puru. These were the tribes ranged against our Bharat Putra Sudas. The leader was somebody, the king of the Purus. You will be familiar with the Purus and the Kurus. They occur all the time in all our Itihas and Puran. So, on the banks of the Ravi, Sudas met these 10 kings and he won. This was the point from where the identity of this tribe started getting merged in the identity of this larger subcontinent. So the idea is, if I would invite viewers to read Shrikant Talageri's blogspot. He has all these things in great detail. So he also says that there is a description in the Rigveda from the earliest books to the later books of moving from the east to the west. So they were moving from the east towards Punjab. They came to the banks of the Ravi. Then they had this big fight. Then they expanded across the banks of the Ravi. So then they went into the Sapt Sandhav, the 7 tributaries of the Sindhu river. Then that means you go up to the northwest to Pakistan, towards Afghanistan, that area. And this can be seen through a description of the flora and fauna in the Rigveda. So now you see.
If you don't mind me asking.
What?
So the Bharat tribe expanded. So where within the Indian subcontinent, where were they originally from? Our best knowledge. That's the first question.
I think, let me answer this. What we can mostly understand is they were from around Haryana.
Haryana, okay.
Today's Haryana.
Okay. And the second question is, so this battle of the 10 kings, I'm not talking about historical evidence, I'm just talking about the knowledge or our assumptions based on the texts and the Itihas. Is this battle of 10 kings before, after the Ramayana and Mahabharata?
Much before. Utkarsh. Thousands of years before.
Okay, so that is
thousands of years before. Remember, I am talking about the old books of the Rigveda, the oldest books of the Rigveda. And these oldest books of the Rigveda, Bharat is first mentioned in book 6, oldest book. His sons or descendants Sahdev and Somak are mentioned in book 4. Then in book 7, that is the third oldest book of the entire gamut of 10 mandals. It is in book 7 that the Dashragya Yuddha is mentioned. So much older.
Wow, so Sri Ram's brother Bharat is the namesake of the original Bharat.
Yes, and you will find Bharat's dotted across our Itihas. Because there was also in the Mahabharata, you have heard of Dushyant and Shakuntala. So their son was also called Bharat. So this name will recur, and in the Jain tradition also there are many Bharats. So this name will recur because it is an echo across the millennia of the cultural political importance of the Bharat tribe, which was the seed of this country.
Wow, okay.
So and then so you see how it happens. In book 6, 3, 7 and 4, we have many mentions of the Bharat tribe, of different descendants of the Bharat tribe. In book 7, we learn that Sudas manages to overcome all the others. Then let's go back to book 1. The first verse of book 1, Mandal 1 of the Rigveda, what does it say? It says, we have all gathered here around the fire. We are people who have worshipped different gods. We are different people. Today, let us decide to come together. Let us decide to worship all our gods. The old ones and the new ones, we will worship them all together. So this gives a hint of a kind of integration. everyone who was beaten by Bharat was not kind of, they did not go into oblivion. All of them have played a big role in India's history. For example, the Purus, and then there is the Purus themselves and the Bharats had a very strong connection, and they came together later in the clan called the Kurus. And the Kurus from the Kauravas who are there in the Mahabharata. So none of these people were, kind of decimated. They were all amalgamated. They were all consolidated, put together. And then you have book 1, verse 1 of the Rigveda saying, we will worship everyone. We will worship your gods, my gods, all gods, and we will go on from here. So therefore in the Rigveda you find worship of many gods. Varun, Mitra, Usha, Rudra, you find worship of many gods. So everyone who was there got together under the leadership of the Bharat tribe. That is why the Bharat tribe became the kind of leader, and it gave its name to this part of the world, this subcontinent. Now, isn't that a kind of fascinating story?
Sorry, go ahead. You're saying something?
No, you go ahead.
No, so then how do I relate the origin of Hinduism itself and the Bharat tribe? Is it Hinduism preceding the Bharat tribe? Is it a consequence of this integration? Any
yes.
sense of that?
See, it is all of these different gods who were worshipped by these different tribes, including the Bharat tribe and the other 10 tribes. All of them are now our gods. All of them are now Hindu gods. So it's this amalgamation is part of what we call Hinduism today. So these were, all we can think of all of them as different elements of Hinduism, which were brought together originally by the Bharats, and then of course Utkarsh. It's been so many thousands of years of integration and innovation and change, with the roots being the same.
Okay, got it.
So the other thing I want to say is, if you look at the archaeological evidence of the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, you will see that there is a lot of correspondence with the way in which the older part of the, in the old books, the eastern part is prominent. So in the Harappan period, the eastern rivers are prominent in the old books. They are on the periphery with no mention of the eastern tributaries of the Saraswati, because later what happened was that the Saraswati dried up. So in the later books, you have no mention of the Saraswati river. It is in the earlier books, though no mention of the eastern tributaries of the Saraswati. So in the old books, the Saraswati is very, very important. There is a famous Nadi Sukt, which has Sindhu through Ganga mentioned over there. These geographical indicators, they run in tandem with the westward movement that we are finding. So there is a westward movement in the Rigvedic books. But this is something, Utkarsh, which I would like to do a special podcast on, the parallels between the Sindhu Saraswati civilization and what we can read from the Vedic corpus.
From the Rigveda.
Yes,
Okay.
the all the Vedas actually.
All the Vedas.
Yeah, not just this one. So now, like I said, with the way in which new discoveries are being made, remember those chariots? That was also kind of breaking news. Okay, not 2-month-old breaking news, but definitely just a couple of years. So new evidences will come up to bridge the gaps in evidence that we can see right now. But this is the, larger story. So this is in the context, there are many ways and many topics for which the Vedic and Harappan or Saraswati Sindhu parallels are very important. For the moment, we are discussing Bharat, so let's get back to it.
Yeah.
This is something which I could not resist saying, so but let's get back to Bharat. So we have Bharat in the Vedic corpus. Now, if we move on to the Ramayana. So the Ramayana is older than the Mahabharata. I'm sure you know that the Ramayana itself is mentioned in the Mahabharata many times. So what happens in the Ramayana? In the Ramayana, Sri Ram is exiled. So what does he do? He explores the entire subcontinent. So the Ramayana is a geographical mapping of this country. And it goes, there is no place in this country where you will not find some mention of the heroes and gods of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. That is what both the Pandavas and Sri Ram were sent into exile. And they spent their exile across the length and breadth of the subcontinent. So both in the Ramayana and in the Mahabharata, you have a geographical description of the the natural features, etc., of the whole country. So, what is the rough description of the country everywhere? That is a rough description. Sometimes it is kind of... Now I have moved on from the name to the geographical mapping of the name. So, if there was Bharat, where was Bharat? What was its territory? What was its space? So, that space is always said as it is the land north of the sea and south of the mountains. You see how it takes in the Indian peninsula?
Yeah.
So that is always the rough description. And this rough description is often, really honed to a very sharp edge also. In the Mahabharata, there is a question from Dhritarashtra to Sanjay. So you know who Dhritarashtra is? He is the father of Duryodhan.
Very familiar.
Yeah, the blind father of Duryodhan. And you remember he is listening to the whole story through the eyes of his minister Sanjay, who has Divya Drishti.
Sanjay.
Yeah, who has Divya Drishti, so he can see whatever is happening. So the whole thing often unfolds as a dialogue between Dhritarashtra and Sanjay. So in the Bhishma Parv, which is the 6th book of the Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra asks Sanjay, please describe Bharat Varsh to me. What is Bharat Varsh? Where is Bharat Varsh? So there are 68 verses of description of the land and the people. Very, very specific description. And today, very sophisticated maps are being made from that description. But what I want to show you here, and we will put it in later, is what Alexander Cunningham in the 19th century, he looked at the Mahabharata and made some kind of rough idea of what this whole map will look like, and I'll show it to you. See how it corresponds to what we think of as India. So if you look at both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the Ramayana has kings and people from all parts of the country, including the south, north, everywhere. Look at the Mahabharata. The kings who fought in the Mahabharata war came from everywhere. For example, let's take the Northeast, because the Northeast was one of the very neglected areas of India, as if, it was not really part of India. There are people in the Northeast who actually claim descent from the heroes of the Mahabharata. So they are the Vishnu Priyas of Manipur, Vishnu Priya Maitis. They say they are the children of Arjun and Ulupi. Their son was Babruvahan and their direct ancestor is Babruvahan. You will find such stories in every corner of this country. So the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, like I told you last time too, these are the two pillars of Indic civilization. And you will find everything that you want to know about the identity, the roots of the people in Ramayana and Mahabharata. It's a little sad, Utkarsh, that, suppose you just Google some academic papers on Bharat. So you will find many Marxist scholars writing reams on why Bharat was no identity. It did not even have any territorial integrity. So what they do is that they just ignore things which are uncomfortable for them. So these 68 verses in the Mahabharata which describe Bharat Varsh exactly have been ignored. by scholars very happily. And I don't know how they square it with their own conscience, but the thing has been ignore evidence if you don't like it, mistranslate it, misconstrue it, dismiss it. Those of you who know Sanskrit, do please read these 68 verses from the Bhishma Parv, where there is a description of not just the land but also the people. So you were talking about identity. So this is Bharatvarsh. Where is it? Who are the people? What is the culture? What is the society like? Everything is given over there. So it's...
so that's interesting, and it's sorry, go please finish.
No, go ahead. I'm going to slip into something else after this. So do say what you were saying.
Yeah, I think that is pretty compelling, how should I say, evidence is the right word probably right there, because you have across the entire subcontinent a shared understanding or a shared cultural history, even if it is of an epic, right? There are, everybody knows it, as you said, whether you are in one corner of the country or the other. That is as factual and as easily confirmable as anything else.
Yes.
Right? That's number one. And number two, if you have very specific description, a very specific geographical description in a work that is, that is so old that even dating, I mean, even the conservative estimates of how old it is significant. It far precedes many modern civilizations. So that is a slam dunk. I mean, if there was ever any doubt, that itself is a slam dunk piece of evidence right there. It doesn't need much convincing, honestly.
But Utkarsh, there are many slam dunk pieces of evidence, and I will refer you to some papers by someone called Sen Gupta. There's someone called Clementine Ojha, I am sorry to say.
Right.
Her name is Clementine Ojha. She's written a paper. You just read it and you see how well they are convinced that nothing, Bharat doesn't exist. So it's a question of what you want to believe and what you want others to believe. It's a question of certain colonial ideas which had to be upheld, even if you had to do a lot of academic skullduggery and academic cheating. Still, those ideas had to be upheld. But this is something we have pointed out all the time. You were saying something?
No, I was saying the good thing is, unlike some other topics that we've discussed, right? So, Aryan invasion theory, everybody thinks Aryans, Dravidians, blah blah. Caste system, where the modern distortion of the Varna system is probably what everyone thinks and knows. When it comes to the case of India as a country, it could be my naivety, it could be my social group, but this is not something that I find people, maybe in academic circles it's a big contentious topic. Maybe on the internet, maybe on Twitter or X, but at least in day-to-day life, this doesn't seem that contentious to me in amongst the people that I talk to, which is good news actually.
Which is good news, yes. Which is good news because the colonial apparatus tried its best to make every Indian, every Bharatiya believe that they did not belong to any country. But we have a lot of ground to cover. If you think this is slam dunk, please wait for the rest of it. I have tons and tons of evidence.
That grand unified theory of everything, which will prove 43 is the answer to life. Sorry, I had to make a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide. Anyways,
I'm sorry. I have I don't have any such grand unified theories. But I will tell you about other pieces of evidence. Now, there is a Natya Shastra, which is called the Fifth Ved. This is a book on aesthetics and art and dance and music, etc., which was written around Mauryan times. So the Natya Shastra also has not only a full geographical description of Bharat, but also a cultural and importantly a linguistic one. So which language was spoken where, in which region, what clothes were worn where were the people like this, like that or the other. So this is the Natya Shastra. Now what I want to do is actually it's not fair to really fling a lot of Sanskrit onto people in this podcast, but I must just give 2 lines. This is the traditional description of Bharat, which comes in the Purans. It comes from the same antecedents that we have spoken of in the Mahabharata, but these are very, very famous lines. So I would like our podcast viewers to know these lines and the meaning of these lines. So I am going to tell you about the one which is there in the Vishnu Puran. You know that there are 18 Purans, and these 18 Purans are the history of our country from every possible aspect: social, cultural, linguistic, technical, scientific, astronomical, astrological, everything. They have everything in it. So from these two Purans, in the Vishnu Puran, the shlok says, Uttaram yat samudrasya himadrischaiva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nama bharati yatra santati. So you get the same idea here. It is to the north of the sea, Uttaram yat samudrasya, to the south of the snow-clad mountains. This is Bharat, and the name of all the Santati, we are all Bharatiyas. This is the one in the Vishnu Puran. In the Brahmanda Puran is the same thing in a slightly different way. Uttaram yat samudrasya himvad dakshinam cha chat varsham tad bharat nam yatreyam bharati praja. So you see, it's the same idea, just put in slightly different words. This is a very, very famous traditional shlok which all of us know to describe our country. This Puran itself would be 1,000, 2,000 years old. Please don't go by Wikipedia articles which will tell you that this was written in the 17th century or 16th century. There's a lot of such rubbish floating around, done by a lot of people who think of themselves as experts. Now, one of these experts is called Patrick Olivelle. Day before yesterday, he has written an article that there were no temples in India till 500 of the Common Era. Now, this Patrick Olivelle is the same guy who has translated the Arthashastra of the Mauryan period, in which every city at the center had a huge temple to Uma Mahesh. So, did he forget? Amnesia. So, that's why, this is just an example.
Maybe you should bring him onto the podcast.
Oh, he'll never come. He'll never come. Everything that he writes about the Arthashastra, I am tooth and nail opposed to it. He is the type who will go to, a BBC show and spout nonsense. He is that type. Now, I'll repeat something that I had said in the first episode. Remember Sati? And how when she died, Shivji carried her body around and it fell everywhere.
Yeah.
So where did it fall? It fell outlining and filling in Bharat. I will just show the 51 Shakti Peeths. Just take a look at it. This all outlines Bharat civilizationally. Today, one of them is in China, one of them is in Pakistan, many are in Bangladesh, some are in Nepal, and of course the majority are in India. But this is the civilizational idea of the body of Bharat, not only thought of in masculine terms as the king Bharat and the tribe Bharat, but also in feminine terms as Bharat Mata. You heard of Bharat Mata? And remember how I discussed that this whole idea comes from the idea of Sati, of Devi, actually being the body of the country. So that's where it comes from. After this, of course, you have travelers such as Xuanzang in the 6th century, or so many others who came in, described the geography. In fact, Xuanzang talks of standing in Afghanistan at the gates of what he said was India. And he also describes it in classical terms as with mountains in the north and the sea in the south. After
that just reminded me, since you mentioned Afghanistan, I just remembered 20 years ago or something, the Taliban was destroying a bunch of Buddha statues.
Yeah, Bamiyan Buddhas, yeah.
Right. So that was all part of the Indian civilization.
Yes, of course, of course. Afghanistan till the 12th century was ruled by Hindu Shahi kings. It is only in the 12th century that it became Islamic. And look at it now, Hindus have been wiped out. So, Hindus have been wiped out from places which were their roots. Look at Pakistan, wiped out. A lot of our history resides in the Bhumi of Pakistan. But we cannot access it any longer. The same for Bangladesh. So many of our Shakti Peeths in Bangladesh, as we speak, they are being broken down and desecrated. I have a young friend who I will invite to the podcast. She works in the northeast and in Bangladesh with the temples of Devi over there, and she has done a lot of field work and research on that, and she will tell you heartbreaking stories of what is happening to the Shakti Peeths over there. So, civilizational markers can be done and dusted into the ground, Utkarsh, because there's nobody over there to own it. There's nobody over there to sustain it. So naturally, if there are no Hindus in Pakistan and no Hindus in Afghanistan and in Bangladesh, who is going to keep up the temple worship? Who is going to keep up these Shakti Peeths? Nobody. And
Actually,
you see stories every day.
That just made me realize something. That
What?
This is a pretty old civilization, but likely the events of 1947 were probably one of the most destructive
Yes.
breaking apart of that civilization in like whatever thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
Literally one political event.
Yes.
It's quite fascinating.
Yes, it's tragic because two arms were cut off.
It's translating in a tragic way, yeah, but it's crazy. So it's literally till before 1947, in whatever ebbs and flows. I mean, that civilization had a presence in all these different places.
Yes.
And now it's just been cut off.
Yes.
And
Utkarsh,
if you look at it,
it has just taken, 70 years odd to remove all traces of Hindus from Afghanistan, Pakistan and now Bangladesh. Almost all traces have been removed. So Bangladesh and Pakistan now have about 1% or 2% Hindus, and maybe by the time our podcast is going on, they will manage to kill and convert all those Hindus. Who knows?
Yeah.
So
it's less than a lifetime, right? 70 years, less than one human lifetime.
Yes,
And
indeed.
it can have such a very interesting. I mean, it's just. I never thought of it in that way because we tend to think of things in our terms. When you think of it from a slightly long-term point of view, it's like okay, since the origin of the civilization till 70 years ago, it had one of those things kind of.
And for people who research ancient India, it is a matter of great sorrow, Utkarsh, and I will never be able to access that part of ancient India, ever. And some sporadic research goes on in Pakistan, but you know what the situation is over there. So nothing much can be expected. In fact, temples are being turned into meat shops, and temples are being turned into toilets as we speak. So yes, the talk about being a wounded and bleeding civilization, which we did last time, it's not something which is ended. It is still there. You know, that civilizational memory is there somewhere, but it's getting more and more, embedded deeper and deeper into the ground. Very soon we'll forget. Ask the average 15-year-old today.
But just to go on a slight tangent, it's interesting how some of that civilizational memory survives in other parts. So whenever I look at Malaysia and Indonesia, I'm always struck by how the Indic civilizational memory kind of survives, like the way their weddings are done. It'll remind you more of an Indian quote-unquote Hindu wedding than it would of something happening, say, in the Middle East.
Yes.
Even though technically it is an Islamic wedding that's going on.
Yes,
right?
so because Malaysia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, they were part of the civilizational reach of India. They were part of Indic civilization. It was only in the 7th century, 7th, 8th century that they became Islamic, with the great wave of Islamization which happened after the 7th century. It was only then that they became Islamic. And, look at the Ramayana over there, the Hikayat
So it
Sri
was
Ram.
that long back, like 1200 years ago.
Sorry?
It was that long ago, 7th, 8th century.
Yes.
AD.
Yeah.
Then I'm shocked that it still remains. I mean, 1,000 years is enough to obliterate anything.
It should be, but
really shocked.
some Indic roots do remain. But Utkarsh, I don't know about now, as in immediately now, but when I used to go there, say about 20-25 years ago, they did not like to be reminded of that Indic substratum at all.
I will absolutely agree with that. That's also the case right now. So these are two separate things. They
Yes.
absolutely do not want to be reminded of
Yeah.
any of it. They don't even think of, they don't identify it.
Yes.
India is a completely nothing related to them.
Yes. Especially in
that's consistent.
Malaysia. Especially in Malaysia.
Yeah.
I think Thailand
Both
that ways
countries.
is much better.
Thailand anyway is not an Islamic country, it's
Yeah.
more Buddhist.
Yeah.
So when I'm just talking Indonesia and Malaysia here. That said, a lot of their customs have, which they associate with themselves and their
Yes.
culture,
Yes.
have been taken root. So that's kind of the dichotomy which I find
Yes,
fascinating.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And they have a version of the Ramayana which is called the Hikayat Shri Rama. And in that, Allah is mentioned in that Ramayana because it is an Islamic Ramayana, so to speak. But the story remains the same. So yes, all
Yeah.
these things are quite interesting and fascinating, and the Bharatiyata or the Indicness of so many different civilizations in Asia is a story which is, waiting to be explored. We should do that too sometime, Utkarsh. But I was, like I said, I don't know how long it's been, but okay, it's almost been an hour. But I have a lot more evidence to, kind of hit you in the face with. I don't know how I'm going to do it.
Right.
Okay, it'll have to be very
So
quick.
I think what we can do is, I think we can cover the topic on princely states probably at a different thing. Just
Yes,
not that
maybe we
short.
can do the princely states later. Today we'll just do
Yeah.
Bharat.
Yes, let's just do that.
Yeah, okay. So I was talking to you about travelers such as Zhuangzang in the 6th century who gives a description. In the 8th century, there is somebody called Adi Shankaracharya. You would have heard of him. He
Of course,
is, yeah.
of course.
So Adi Shankaracharya was another great unifier and signifier of Bharat's unity. He crisscrossed the entire country. He engaged with people from different sampradayas, argued with them, had shastrarth with them, and in most cases converted them to his way of thinking. That is, that is what shastrarth is all about. And Adi Shankaracharya is the one who established Advait. He didn't establish Advait, but he took Advait to a different level, to a different plane. And his establishment of the Hindu tenets and Hindu way of life is something which we still follow today. So he also made 4 mutts in the 4 cardinal directions to signify the unity of this Bharatiya subcontinent. So that was Badri Vishal in the north, that was Sringeri in the south, Puri in the east, and Dwarka in the west. All these mutts were established by Shankaracharya. Now, where are all these places? They mark the boundaries, the borders of the Indian subcontinent. So this is Adi Shankaracharya. This is the 8th century. Now we go back a little bit more and just look at evidence from, say, poetry and drama. Let's look at the dramas, the plays written by Kalidas. You would be familiar with Kalidas. He is the preeminent Sanskrit playwright and poet. Although he is not my personal favorite, one day we should do Kalidas versus Bhas. I am on team Bhas. I am not on team Kalidas. Having said that, Kalidas is accepted as the preeminent Sanskrit poet. Now, you read his Megh. So, what is Megh? It is the story of a cloud. So, there is a Yaksh who has been exiled from his home because he did something to anger Lord Shiv. And he is sitting down in exile and asking a cloud to take his message to his lady love. So this is what? This is the cloud messenger, Megh. So he tells the cloud that you start from here and you have to reach Alkapuri, and where will you go? What will you see as you are flying up? This is nothing but a geographical description of North India. This is only North India, mind you. Okay? But and he was sitting in Ramtek. Ramtek is in Nagpur. So this is India, not North India exactly, but to the north of Nagpur. Nagpur, which is in Maharashtra, it is seen to be said to be the center point of India, the Indian subcontinent, Nagpur. So it is from there that you have a description in Meghdut. There is another play of his which is called Raghuvansham. This is a play on all the ancestors of Sri Ram, Lord Ram. So Raghu is one of the very important ancestors. So Raghu went out to conquer Prithvi. So this description of Prithvi, this description shows you, takes you all around India. This is another geographical description of Bharat. Kalidas, there is a lot of argument about when he actually lived, but the best evidence is that he lived in the Sunga period, which is after the Mauryans, which is roughly around 1st, 2nd century before the Common Era. So that is the time we are talking of. So this is some very old evidence from, plays and poetry, etc. Now, Utkarsh, I have been talking a lot about things which are in the social construct of people's minds. So this is what is called civilizational unity, where there are certain events, ideas, ways of life, or even Sanatan Dharma, which everyone follows. The other thing I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast was political unity.
Political.
Yeah. So what about political unity? Now this is an important question, because the colonized eye has looked upon India through the lens of the Westphalian concept of the nation state. This was the European 16th century Westphalian concept, where there was one nation, one ethnicity, one religion. That made up a nation state. So this,
sorry, what is that word?
Westphalian. There was a Treaty of Westphalia in the 16th century, and from there come the ideas about nation state that Europeans espouse. That is their idea of the nation state.
Okay.
The Treaty of Westphalia. Now in this Treaty of Westphalia, it was all about making little countries everywhere. A lot of them had got together to decide which country would be what. So their idea is that for a nation state to actually exist and have some political boundaries, it should be one ethnicity, one religion, one nation. Now that's impossible for us. Completely impossible. We are not like that. We've never been like that. The Mauryans were a multi-ethnic and multilingual and multi-religious place. So forget about the India of today. So when you have this kind of idea imposing itself on the reality that is Bharat, the lens is obviously distorted, the results are obviously completely distorted. But our idea has always been multilingual, always multi-ethnic, always multi-religious. I've told you about, we spoke about the Bharat tribe and the decision by everyone to get together and to worship every god, old or new. That is the lodestone around which this identity of Bharat has been constructed over thousands of years. So let's take the idea of this multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-religious state. What was the first time it got a very firm political border of which we have actual archaeological evidence? Now it's not as if the kingdom of Yudhishthir or the kingdom of Ram did not exist. We don't have archaeological evidence, if you know what I mean. We have texts, we have compositions. For the Mauryan period, which is at least 2300 years ago, if not more. Because there is also a controversy about the timing, and it could be actually 1000 years before that too. But let's take the mainstream understanding, 2300 years ago. So at this time, there was a political entity which called itself Jambu Dweep, which was Bharat. It also called itself Bharat, obviously, because it accepted the entire Vedic corpus and the Itihas and the Puran. So this was the kingdom of Chandragupta Maurya. From Saurashtra to Chandraketugarh, or more than Saurashtra, actually from Baluchistan to Chandraketugarh, which is Bangladesh. So from Pakistan to Bangladesh. Then in the north, it went up till Afghanistan, Kabul. And in the south, it was up till Madurai. This was the kingdom of Chandragupta Maurya, with very fixed boundaries, with borders, with a fort, in fact even a system of passports. And of this we know a lot from Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, Jain, Buddhist sources. We know a lot about them. And what archaeological remains do we have? We have inscriptions of the Mauryans. They used to write down their inscriptions and plant them in different important places or write them down on rock surfaces. So we have found these inscriptions, and that is how we are able to actually map out the entire area. And we also have found the directions given to the people who were the scribes in the capital. The capital of this country was Patliputra, which is now Patna. And it had 4 regional capitals. These were Takshashila in the north, Suvamnagari in the south, Tosali in the east, and Ujjaini in the center. So we have instructions given to scribes which we can read, that from Patliputra will emerge one direction which the state wants to give to everyone, the government, and it will go to these regional capitals. From these regional capitals it will go into smaller places and be disseminated. So this was a politically aware, united Jambudweep, which was Bharat, under the kingship of Chandragupta Maurya, then Bindusar, and then Ashok. So you have, right now I want to show something which is, this is a Greek map according to Ptolemy. There is the map of the one I was speaking about, Mahabharat. Then you can see a map also which is made by Varaha Mihir. You remember Varaha Mihir? We have spoken of him when we spoke about Jyotish and astronomy. So he was not only an astronomer, he was also a geographer. So there was a mapping of the shape of the country. So Ptolemy and Megasthenes, etc., these are from the Mauryan period, Greek sources from around and just after the Mauryan period. The civilizational boundaries and the political boundaries became very much coincident during the time of the Mauryans. Although I will not strictly say that, because this culture was going out to the Southeast Asian countries also. But a lot of what we understand as India or as undivided India before 1947, or much more than that, was part of the Mauryan idea of Bharat or Jambudweep. So this was the first political unity of the Indian subcontinent, and the Mauryans have always represented Bharat and its unity. So whether it be the Guptas, they called themselves after the kings of the Mauryans, Chandragupta, Vikramaditya, etc. Look at the modern Indian state. Our emblem is the emblem of the Mauryans. Our national bird is a national bird of the Mauryans. Our currency is the currency of the Mauryans. So the Mauryans have represented the political unity of Bharat. And this landmass has gone through a lot of vicissitudes. We talked about the chopping off of the two sides. Even before that, it broke up into smaller regions, then it combined together again. So there have been very few entities who have managed to control the entire subcontinent. And the British are not one of them, by the way. The Mauryans did it. The Mughals did it to some extent, although not in the south and not in the northeast. Utkarsh, when I was just reading up a few things for this podcast, I of course went to the Battle of Saraighat, where Aurangzeb fought with Lachit Borphukkan. It was one of the greatest naval battles in the history of the world. Did you ever hear of it? I'm sure you didn't. The Battle of Saraighat, where Lachit Borphukkan fought with Aurangzeb's army. So this was, I was just reading it in the context of, how Aurangzeb could not control the entire subcontinent, but we must again pick it up some other time. So the Marathas did it in the 17th and 18th century. The British did it to some extent, and maybe next time we'll go into details of the princely states. But they were definitely not masters of the entire subcontinent. There were 500 odd princely states, and they had their own rules and law, etc., etc. Although Britain was a big brother and it did control a lot of it, it was not the political suzerain of the entire subcontinent. This is something worth remembering. This is actually something worth remembering because, they try to set themselves up and say that we were the rulers of India. They were not the rulers of Bharat. They had 17 provinces of Bharat. The rest, which was about, say, 40% of the land area and 23% of the population, they were in the hands of the local kingdoms. So the largest political empire has been the Mauryans, and the others, the Mughals, the Marathas, the British, have been to a larger or smaller extent able to actually cover this entire subcontinent of Bharat. Like I said, because of the vicissitudes, it has sometimes become small, sometimes become big, and its shape has changed. As is the same for any other country. I was just looking at the shapes of France and England, and there's been a lot of change over the past 2000 years. It's the same for India, it's the same for Bharat. However, there is no colonial power to tell the French and the English you cannot think of yourself as a country because of these vicissitudes. For us, there have been people who have said that you don't exist as a country. It was basically done to hit at our self-confidence, Utkarsh. It was basically done to, cut out the roots of our identity. Roots of our identity are very much in Bharat, and I don't know, I hope that I have given you enough evidence about Bharat and how we have always called ourselves Bharat.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. The good, as I was saying earlier, the good news is that there is a certain, well, I'm just going to use the word Indianness, for lack of a better word.
Bharatiyata.
That everybody has. Yeah, for sure. Like, even if you go to a foreign country, like even when I first came to university here in Singapore, it doesn't matter whether you're from Kashmir or from Tamil Nadu. I'm just using the opposite so far, but there is a certain quality that does, you could call it cultural unity, you could call it anything you want, but it does exist. And that is undeniable. And the moment you move outside of the country, that goes away. Right? So there is a trace of that, and I would argue there is a trace of that in most people from the subcontinent, all over the subcontinent, including the parts that have been chopped off.
So that's the civilizational part, Utkarsh.
Yeah. That's the civilizational part.
Although I must add over here that Pakistan and Bangladesh are doing their damnedest to forget that they were Indians. That's their problem. That is their existential problem. Because they have to define themselves as not Bharat. So they don't know what they are. They're just not Bharat. And that's a big part of the problem they have in stabilizing their countries. You can't just, think of yourself as not X and then set down
when you
roots.
have been X for thousands of years and not been X for 70 years, it's difficult to let go of the thousands of years of being X.
Yes, but there is a great hatred of X engendered in them. Therefore, they want to be not Bharat. And I don't know how they are going to solve this problem. I really don't know.
It's a tricky one.
They don't have any identity. They don't have any national identity. What is Pakistan? They don't have any national identity. It's mostly, the Punjabis which have dominated all the other provinces, and therefore there's a lot of unrest because of that.
Yeah. I'm sure getting into Pakistan's troubles would be a whole different topic.
Good God. We would need hundreds of hours.
Yeah. But good. I think, for me, the two takeaways from today's conversation have been, one, the evidence is not even a question of, it's literally the evidence is there. Just sitting there in plain sight, right? So there's nothing controversial about it. It's just there.
Utkarsh, you say that, but read any of the history books which are being written even today. Even today, I think the VC of Ashoka University wrote a history book. He says the same thing. No India, no Bharat. He's a communist. He's a left historian.
Luckily, no one is reading his books. That's why no one I know is reading his books. Luckily. So that's okay. No, but for me, really, and I think you might have noticed in the middle of the conversation, it just struck me the severity and how short term that blow to the civilization has been. I never thought of it that way, right? I always think of political boundaries being drawn, redrawn, something here, something there. But it is, especially when something is created in opposition to what it came from.
Yes.
That's a very strange situation to be in.
Yes.
So,
Yes, so
yeah.
we've given birth to a monster.
Yeah. And by we, you mean certain great men of history.
Yes, certain great men of history who we shall not name. He who shall not be named.
They do not need to be named. I
Yeah.
think everyone knows who they are. Okay. So that was good. Anything else that you wanted to mention?
No. I think I am very satisfied with the way in which I answered your questions about Bharat and the roots of Bharat and going back to the Rigveda. And this whole
Yeah.
research of Shrikant Talageri and Sanjeev Sanyal, they kind of come together so beautifully when I read the Rigveda that I feel that just the few gaps in evidence which are there are going to be filled in very quickly, and we'll see the parallels between the Saraswati Sindhu civilization and the Vedic corpus even more clearly. And it is from there that the identity of Bharat comes. And as you see, the further we go, whether it is Itihas or Puran or poetry or dance or music or travelers' descriptions, everything just strengthens that identity, which is why it is so strong, Utkarsh.
Yeah. And which is why, like we were giving the example of, I mean, not that that's the country, but it's still part of the civilization. Portions of the civilization live on in a different part of the world, even though it was removed like more than 1,000 years ago. There's some interesting cultural glue there that is difficult to get rid of.
Yes, very correct. I like the term cultural glue, which they can't get rid of, even though they would like to, but they are not able to get rid of it. Very, very correct.
Yeah, and then you co-opt it and make it your own, even though you don't recognize where it's from. It's okay, as long as it's still there.
Yes, it's okay. I think, although I would like a greater recognition of their Indic roots, let's see when they reach there. Perhaps they will. And in Indonesia, it's not the same. Indonesia is pretty good about its Indic roots. Malaysia is more militant. But Indonesia is very happy about its Indic roots.
Yeah, and actually many Indonesians I talk to mention it. Not they call it Indic roots, they mention, we also have the, Ramayana, Ram, all that they mention.
Utkarsh, we must do a Southeast Asian series of podcasts on this topic.
And I will tell you when we will do it. We will do it when you come to Southeast Asia, because we can't speak on the topic without having stepped foot in the region.
Okay, then. Yes, okay. Let me plan my itinerary then. Let me plan my schedule. Yes, that's something I really want to do.
And then you can do it live from the different locations.
Yes, that would be great. That would actually be lovely.
Wonderful.
Hoping to do that.
Okay, folks. Yeah. Should we end it here?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful, folks. Thank you for joining again. This was fun. Each of these episodes, even though I'm part of the, the person on the camera, I end up learning so much, and I end up getting an aha moment almost every episode. Then I have to go and think about it for the next few days. So thank you for joining, and I hope that you had an aha moment as well.
Thank you very much, and do keep telling us what more you would like us to talk about, what more you would like to hear from us. All the feedback for the last episode was very, very encouraging. People reached out who had never reached out before. So I was very happy to see how well that reasoned debate between me and Utkarsh went down with everyone else. I hope you liked this episode also, and we will see you again next week. Namaskar.